Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've been working in IT for retail chains for over 15 years now, and I've seen my fair share of interesting characters. But this story is about the time I dealt with probably the most obsessive-compulsive controller I've ever encountered in my career. I landed this job about 5 years ago at a pretty successful retail chain. The owner is this really sharp guy who knows his business inside and out. When I came in, the company was already doing great with multiple locations across the state. The computer systems needed some serious updating though, which is why they brought me on board. Everything was going smoothly until about 6 months into my role when they hired this new controller. Now, don't get me wrong, being detail-oriented is crucial for an accountant. But this woman took it to a whole new level. She waltzed into the office one day and decided our company credit card system needed an overhaul. Sure, we were a bit loose with it, but everything was documented and the owner was happy because he was racking up serious airline miles on it. We're talking about a card with a 6-figure limit that we had to make mid-month payments on just to keep using it. The controller created this new payment request form. The form itself wasn't bad, it was actually pretty useful, but then came her policy, and oh boy was it a doozy. The controller announced her new policy to everyone. She insisted that every single purchase, no matter how small, would need this form filled out and signed by either the owner or 2 higher-ups. When I asked about small emergency purchases, she said there would be absolutely no exceptions to this rule. Now, in retail IT, time is money. When a cash register goes down, we need to fix it now. Not tomorrow, not in 2 hours, now. And sometimes all I need is a $25 part from the internet to get things running again. But according to her new policy, I had to track down 2 executives or the owner himself just to buy a $25 part. And one of these executives was barely even in the office most days. One crazy morning, 3 different stores had register issues. I found myself running to the owner's office 3 times within an hour, forms in hand. The owner noticed it was my 3rd visit when I walked in. When I explained that register 4 at store 3 was down and I needed his signature for a replacement part, he seemed concerned about the frequency of these visits. I had to explain that the executive vice president was out of town, so I needed his signature instead. He signed the form but told me he'd look into the situation. I was walking back to my office when I heard the owner's voice coming from the controller's office. Their conversation was super professional, but you could tell the owner wasn't happy. I overheard the owner explaining that the policy was causing more problems than it was solving. The controller tried to defend her position, saying they needed proper controls in place, but the owner wouldn't hear it, pointing out that when registers were down, they were losing money. When she tried to argue further, he shut down the conversation, stating that this needed to change immediately. The very next day, a new memo came out. The executive vice president could now sign IT emergency purchase forms solo, and I was given my own company credit card with a $500 limit for urgent situations. The controller wasn't too happy about it, but she couldn't say much. Her face when she had to process my first independent purchase was priceless, all pursed lips and twitching eyebrows. A few months later, after seeing how smoothly things ran with the new system, the owner actually expanded it to other departments. Turned out other managers had been having similar issues but hadn't spoken up. The controller stuck around for another year, but her influence never quite recovered. She eventually left for another company, muttering something about proper controls on her way out. Last I heard, she is now working for a tiny company where she can control every penny to her heart's content. I still have that credit card, and the payment request form is still in use, minus the ridiculous approval requirements. Sometimes the simplest solution is just to let people do their jobs without jumping through unnecessary hoops. I've been running my martial arts dojo for some while now. Started training when I was just 6 years old, earned my black belt at 16, and began teaching at 18. My old master passed the dojo down to me when he retired, saying I had the right spirit to carry on his legacy. I've always taken that responsibility seriously. What happened last week still feels surreal. I've dealt with difficult parents before, the ones who think their kids should get special treatment or advance faster than they deserve. But this was a whole new level of crazy. It started when this woman walked in with her son, who looked around 12. Right away, something felt off. The kid was wearing what looked like a costume shop ninja outfit, complete with plastic throwing stars stuck to it. She immediately demanded that her son needed his ninja certification today. When I asked her to clarify what certification she was looking for, she explained that she wanted proof that her son was a real ninja, claiming he had been practicing for months at home. I explained to her that we don't offer ninja certifications and that we teach legitimate martial arts here, where any belt advancement requires proper training and evaluation. The kid was bouncing around, making exaggerated hi-ya sounds and doing random kicks that made me wince. She pointed at her son's behavior, insisting that he had clearly mastered everything because he had watched all the ninja movies and practiced in their backyard every day. I tried to explain that's not how it works, and offered to enroll her son in our beginner's program if he was interested in learning martial arts. She became indignant at the mention of a beginner's program, questioning if I was blind. She then urged her son to demonstrate his skills. Her son proceeded to spin around wildly before falling on his behind. Some of my actual students, who were preparing for their evening class, were trying hard not to laugh. She quickly made excuses for his fall, claiming he just slipped but was usually perfect. She then explained that they needed this certification for his birthday party that weekend, as he had been telling everyone he was a certified ninja. I tried to be understanding, telling her that while I knew she wanted to make her son happy, I couldn't and wouldn't give out fake certifications, as it would be dishonest and disrespectful to everyone who trains hard here. That's when she started getting really angry. She tried to bribe me, asking if I knew how much money she could pay and telling me to name my price. I explained that it wasn't about money, but about integrity, and suggested she either enroll her son in proper classes or look elsewhere. She then accused me of being jealous of her son's natural talent, claiming I was afraid he would show up all my other students. At this point, two of my senior instructors, who had been setting up equipment nearby, moved closer. They could tell things were escalating. She made a final threat saying they would get the certification somewhere else and that I would regret this decision. They stormed out. Later that evening during our advanced class, one of my students noticed a strange smell. Moments later, someone shouted that there was smoke coming from the back of the building. We immediately started evacuation procedures, something we regularly practiced, thankfully. When we got everyone out, I caught movement by the emergency exit. There was Karen, holding what looked like a gas can, with her son filming everything on his phone. She was shouting about how we would have to close down, and then they would open their own dojo to show everyone what real ninjas look like. Before she could do anything else, my two senior instructors, both with over a decade of actual martial arts experience, had already moved in. One swiftly secured the gas can while the other restrained Karen, using the minimum force necessary, exactly as we teach. The kid dropped the phone and tried to run, but another student caught up with him easily. The fire department arrived first, followed by the police. Turns out she had already managed to start a small fire near our back entrance, but our quick response and the building's fire suppression system prevented any serious damage. The police found more concerning items in her car, more accelerants, some crude homemade smoke bombs that thankfully didn't work, and a typed-up manifesto about how big martial arts was suppressing true ninja talent. Yes, really. She got charged with attempted arson, attempting to endanger the lives of minors. We had several young students in class, and a few other charges I'm probably forgetting. Her son got assigned to juvenile counseling. The officers told me she had a history of similar entitled behavior, including trying to force her way into a circus school that refused to certify her son as a master acrobat after one class. We invested in additional security cameras after that, and ironically, enrollment went up once the story got around. Some new students said they chose our dojo specifically because we maintained our standards even under literal fire. If that kid had actually enrolled and trained properly, he might have discovered a genuine love for martial arts. Instead, his mother's entitlement and delusions possibly ruined that chance forever. My grandmother is the type of person who always needs to be in control. The first red flag appeared when my dad saved up for my mom's birthday present, a brand new car. It would have been mom's first car that wasn't a decade old when purchased. Dad had saved up a quarter of the price for the down payment, but needed to put the loan in grandmother's name because of her better credit score. She agreed, but then shocked everyone by declaring that while the car would be in her name and my father could drive it, she would report it stolen if my mother was ever caught behind the wheel. When my mother pointed out that it was supposed to be her birthday present, grandmother simply reminded her that since the car was in her name, she made the rules. That was just the beginning. When my parents were looking to buy a house, she came with another scheme. She offered to pay for the whole house and presented them with papers to sign. What she actually handed them wasn't a deed, but a rental agreement. She wanted triple the market value in rent and demanded to approve every single guest who visited. She even specifically banned my 15-year-old sister from the property. My parents didn't fall for it, but it showed her true colors. Years later, my great-grandparents needed help and offered my parents free housing in exchange for basic care, grocery shopping, and helping them get to bed. When my great-grandmother passed away, she left a provision in her will. Grandmother would get the house, but only after my parents had saved enough to buy their own place. My parents came home from great-grandmother's funeral to find an eviction notice on their door. Grandmother had left a note saying that with all the free rent they'd received, they should have enough saved to move out immediately. The final straw came after I got engaged. I received a letter in the mail that made my blood boil. The letter stated that due to my choice in a spouse, which sickened her, she wanted me to cease all contact with her immediately. She claimed my wife's religious background was unacceptable. The irony, both my wife and I were non-practicing Christians. My parents are agnostic and grandmother had changed religions 7 times since I could remember, bouncing between Buddhism, being spiritual, and various Christian denominations. After all this, no one in the family wanted anything to do with her. I lived 2 miles away but hadn't seen her in 5 years. Then, out of nowhere, she called me. She mentioned hearing about my new family and expressed interest in meeting her great-grandchild. When I corrected her about having multiple great-grandchildren, she seemed surprised and asked since when. I explained that I had 3 kids, age 6, 5, and 3. She quickly brushed past her ignorance and said she'd love to meet them, then asked if I could help with her internet problems. I agreed to come over, and that's when my plan formed. Her problem was simple. She just needed to confirm an installation date with her new provider. But I had other ideas. I lied and told her that her internet was actually working, she just didn't have Netflix or email set up. Then I canceled her internet installation and signed her up for 2 Netflix subscriptions, assuring her everything would be installed in 2 weeks. 2 weeks later, she called to complain that her internet still wasn't working. I drove over pretending to check with my phone. I made up another excuse claiming she needed the Max subscription in our area and used this as an opportunity to sign her up for HBO Max. A month later, when she called about still not having internet, I feigned embarrassment and claimed I had put my address by mistake, saying they'd need to reschedule. Another month passed, and when she asked about her internet again, I told her she had to pay again for the new appointment and took the chance to sign her up for Disney Plus and Hulu. The fun finally ended when my uncle called. He demanded to know why grandmother had 20 streaming subscriptions and no internet, saying she claimed I'd been helping her for 4 months. I reminded him that I hadn't spoken to grandmother in 7 years, not since she publicly declared I sickened her. I suggested he ask her how many kids I have, knowing she wouldn't know. He asked her, and of course, she had no idea. She's now getting tested for Alzheimer's because she's forgetting things and making up imaginary visits with people from her past. My uncle took away all her credit cards to prevent more subscription mishaps. I lost my free HBO access, but it was worth it. Sometimes the best revenge is making someone question their own reality. I'm a contractor who's been in the construction business for over 15 years. Started from scratch, worked my way up, and now I run my own small but successful renovation company. When my wife and I bought our house in this quiet suburban neighborhood 5 years ago, we thought we'd found the perfect spot. Sure, there was a homeowners association, but we figured it wouldn't be a big deal since we keep our property well maintained. I own 2 utility trailers for my work, one enclosed and one open. They're essential for my business, hauling materials and equipment to job sites. Never had any issues until the homeowners association decided to make my life difficult. In 2022, when I got this official-looking letter in my mailbox, the association's president had apparently taken issue with my enclosed trailer parked in my driveway in front of my detached garage. The letter demanded that I remove what they called an abandoned vehicle within 7 days, citing their bylaws. I was shocked by their characterization and immediately pointed out that this was a fully operational, insured, and registered trailer that I actively use for my business. I examined their letter more carefully and noticed something interesting. There was no date on it. 7 days from when exactly? Also, they referenced some bylaw about house and travel trailers, which clearly didn't apply to my utility trailers. I wrote back a detailed response explaining several issues with their letter. I pointed out that without a date, their 7-day deadline was meaningless. I clarified that my trailer wasn't abandoned but rather a properly registered, insured, and regularly used piece of business equipment. Finally, I explained that their referenced bylaw specifically addressed house and travel trailers, not utility trailers, and asked them to review these points and provide clarification if needed. They never responded. Last Wednesday, another letter arrived. This time they were complaining about my open utility trailer in the backyard. Mind you, it's tucked away in the back corner, mostly hidden behind my detached garage. They even included a photo which hilariously proved my point about its discreet location. The letter claimed they had documented another violation regarding my travel trailer being visible from the street and demanded immediate action. They were trying to use the same invalid bylaw from 2 years ago. So I decided to write another response, but this time I went all out. I explained how their own photo proved the trailer was appropriately placed in my backyard and partially concealed by my garage. I called them out for attempting to apply travel trailer bylaws to my utility trailer again and reminded them how this same approach had failed in 2022. I made sure to mention that I kept detailed records of all correspondence, including their previous attempt and lack of response to my rebuttal. I also included copies of my trailer registration, insurance documents, and business license, along with highlighted sections of their own bylaws showing the distinction between different types of trailers. The next day, one of the association board members showed up at my door, red-faced and clutching my letter. He tried to assert their authority, calling my trailers an eyesore. I calmly explained that I wasn't ignoring their authority but rather correcting their misinterpretation of their own bylaws, and offered to show him the registration and insurance documents again. When he insisted that other residents had complained, I told him that they couldn't enforce rules that didn't exist, and unless he could show me where utility trailers were specifically mentioned in the bylaws, we had nothing more to discuss. He took off, but I wasn't done. I decided to attend the next homeowners association meeting. During the resident comments section, I presented my case about their harassment regarding my properly maintained, legally parked utility trailers. I distributed copies of all their letters, my responses, and the relevant bylaw sections to everyone present. The room fell silent as people examined the documents. Then an older gentleman spoke up, sharing that he'd faced similar issues with his lawn trailer being cited under the same bylaw. This opened the floodgates, and suddenly other residents began sharing similar stories. The association board members grew visibly uncomfortable as it became clear this wasn't an isolated incident. By the end of the meeting, they agreed to review their enforcement policies and issue a clarification about utility trailers. I haven't received any more letters since then, and my trailers remain exactly where they were. Sometimes standing your ground and knowing your rights is all it takes to shut down entitled behavior. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.